softly lighting up the night.
Floating, wavy like the ocean. My physical emotions show my spirit as an omen. I'm in motion like the seven seas. Connect with men and them who think like Elohim. My flow warm like a sunbeam. My third eye shine red like the waters in your bloodstream. Young king, my tongue shine without a tongue ring. My talking bling bling like it's nothing. Glowing like slick brick chains at its apex. You basic if you want love without the hatred. It's dangerous, having faith amongst the faithless. Just stay in tune with the ancient and amens. Prayers to the dead and those that deserve killing. Your life is a gift, your presence is Thanksgiving. And to the wise, every day is a holiday. And to my enemies, every day's a borrowed one. Black Storm. Peace, power, prosperity. Rob Black Storm here. Sorry about the background sounds and music. They're having some sort of celebration on my block, but it is what it is. We still gonna make it happen. Shout out to everybody who is here, people who are coming in the building. Have a special guest tonight. Very happy. Been trying to track this brother down. He's been trying to track me down, so we finally made some space to make it happen. I'd like to introduce my special guest, Khepra Ptah. Welcome, my brother, to the channel. Blessing to have you.
Hatapu, Uncle Jasanab. Uncle
Yes, sir.
Jasanab.
Yes, sir.
It is good to be here, good brother. Thank you for inviting me, and it's a pleasure and an honor.
Absolutely. The pleasure is mine, my brother. Thank you for spending your time here on this Sunday with us. You know, it's a beautiful Sunday, so I appreciate you spending some time here. Now, let's start with the greeting, right? What does Hetapu Anu Seneb mean? And I guess the Medunetta, the divine language, if you will, which is what the Medunetta is called. What does that mean, that greeting?
We look at the word Hatep, right? In the conscious community, they use it as a greeting, as a way of saying peace. You know, but also its actual meaning is an offering, a peace offering. So when you look at the Medunetta, that is how it's composed. You see an offering table with an incense censer. You see a mat and a loaf of bread. So if you look at the spelling, the glyphs, that actually makes an altar or a shrine. So when I say Hatep to you, I'm actually greeting the divine within you, and I'm making an offering of peace to you, to the inner being. So when they made offerings to the ancestors, the Shazu or the Sheps, as well as the Neteru, right? These were called Hetepu. So whenever someone makes an offering of peace to you, it is meant to uplift and charge your spirit in a very positive way.
Good, great. So would you say it's the same as the Hindu Namaste? I see the God in you. Similar?
Indeed. From what it is taken as of now. So, and that's what it's about, you know, because we are all here to strive to that connecting with that inner divinity. You know, when you open up the Perdim Heru Ger, also known as the Egyptian Book of the Dead, or should I say mislabeled as such, is actually the book of coming forth by day from night. But there's a part in it where Anui says, Nukba Ntur, which means my soul is divine. So the other part, we say Hatapu and Ankh Ucha Seneb, you're saying life, strength, and health, right? So I'm granting you an offering of life, strength, and health. Hatapu Ankh Ucha Seneb. Ankh Ucha Seneb is also one of the names of Ra. And there's a story that speaks about how, you know, Ra, it begins in the morning as Khepra, at high noon is Ra, and during the times of his descension is Atum, and in the midnight hours is identified or connected with Seker, which is the night sun or the black sun. So he is known as Ankh Ucha Seneb, or the Prince Ankh Ucha Seneb. Each and every one of us have an inner sun. We have a Ra within us. So I'm also connecting to that inner Ra, that inner sun, that inner chi. So when somebody gives you props, it's always a positive charge on your life force, as opposed to when somebody is saying things that are negative to you. Let's say someone is slandering or being disrespectful. It hits you. It's an energy there. So it's kind of like It's literal a blessing. One of the things I think, and I mean, it might sound like a tangent, but I'm going to go full circle. It's really good for when brothers in the conscious community, we greet each other. It's something that we should always do when we see each other. Even when you're with your mate, we build each other up. We pump life into each other. Uncle Chistanel.
Definitely. Now, that's powerful. So Hetapu, Uncle Chanel, my brother, returning it back again in the proper form. Tell me, how did you become? Give us a little bit of history. How did you become Khepra Ptah? I know you probably were born with a government name like the rest of us, and it took you time to earn or learn what these things meant. These two statements. Explain to the people what Khepra Ptah means, one, and two, how did you come into the awakening of your divine self?
Well, Khepra, if you look at the glyph for Khepra, it's a beetle, right? Or the Kemetic Khepra is sometimes depicted as a human with a beetle for a head. But Khepra means a couple things. It means coming into being, right? It also means to roll, because it is believed that creation it was spun into existence, or it's constantly being shaped. Another thing is Khepra represents the yin and yang principle, right? Because they identify Khepra as being masculine and feminine, being able to lay the eggs, and then the eggs would come out as new and reformed beetles. From the larva, it would hatch and spring the adult, and it would come out of the hole as a transformed individual. It was believed that the Khepra beetle represented both the masculine and the feminine. In fact, women would eat them for fertility because it would help her to bring forth a birth. You see what I mean? And new birth. However, Ptah means the opener. That was the nectar of Menefer or Memphis. They say that Ptah laid out the heavens with an iron slab. So Ptah, if you look at the word, Pet means heaven and Ta is earth. So it's a combination of heaven and earth, and you spell it backwards, you get Hatet, which is your true self, which is peace. And Tep is the head. So when you get into African spirituality, you'll notice that we always give props to not just the spiritual part of ourselves, but also the physical part of ourselves. Okay, now as far as the story of how I came into this practice, or should I say this perception of my life, is when I was a child, I'd have all kind of things that would take place, at night. It would scare me. I'd have these dreams and have visions. I believe that a lot of us may have these dreams and visions because it's linked to our ancestors. The way I look at that is that's our ancestors letting you know that they're still there and it's still with us. So when I was a child, I'd often have all these experiences that I could not explain. Now, I was born Lionel Jamal Williams. Jamal, a lot of people in the community knew me as Jamal. My father had been a part of the Nation of Islam, so he had decided to name me Jamal. He had actually taken on the name Jamal himself. So it's one of Allah's 99 attributes in the Islamic tradition, meaning handsome or beauty, and I see life as a divine harmony, nefer. So as time went on, because I saw this Ankh in a vision, right, it scared me at first because I did not remember what it was. But I saw it when I was having this time of, in my youth, when I was scared of my own shadow, and I could feel all this energy. I was very sensitive to energy. So one night I was laying in the bed and I could see all this green energy around me. Later on, I found out that what I was seeing was my own aura. I got up and I looked into the hallway and I saw this glowing blue Ankh, and it disappeared. So I went into my mother's room. I told her I was scared if I could, lay next to her. Now I was a child at the time, and she let me, but she said she had saw something too. And we got her Bible out, started chanting and everything else. Came into my room, she started chanting the Psalms. She's from the South, so they believe in them. They'll tap into them Psalms and burn them candles and perform miracles. So when we got into my room, we felt all this energy. It was crazy. She touched me, and we had a robot that was on my dresser. When she touched me, the robot activated. We got up and ran out. All right, are you able to hear me?
All right, you back up. Yep, you back.
Okay. So what happened?
So you activated the robot. Yeah.
Correct.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Okay.
All right, you back up. You good.
Cool. So after that, my mother and I, we got up and ran out the room. I never seen my mother run so fast in my life. But something had happened. And this would kind of, start me off on this initiatory journey for the rest of my life. Now I began to see that symbol everywhere. And I remember also seeing that symbol in my church, in the church I went to. It actually had an ankh, but they had it in the guise of a Christian symbol. I saw it there. And believe it or not, I saw the ankh in an old Bible that I had, that my mother had laying around. And I can't remember which translation it was, but when you open up the back of that Bible, you see all these Kemetic or Egyptian symbols in the back. And they have been, should I say, transformed into Kemetic into Christian symbols. So you saw the Eye of Ra or the Uchat, you saw the Ankh, you saw the dot with the circle around it representing Ra. They had made all those into Christian symbols, you see. So if you look at your Coptic churches in Africa today, in Kemet, you will see that they have these Kemetic symbols that's actually on the walls of their churches to this day. So this also is a clue that the Coptic Church and Christianity involves the reworkings of the ancient Kemetic mysteries, but taken from an initiatory system of self-realization to a faith-based religion. So anyway, as time went on, I decided I wanted to explore all the religions, because there was something about Christianity that it wasn't feeding me the way I felt I wanted to be fed. There was something missing. The pastor had said, well, there's something interesting about you. He believed that it was my destiny to be a preacher, and perhaps so, maybe so, but not the type of preacher that everybody had in mind. I got into Islam. My father had been in a nation at one point in time, but before he had even become a part of the nation, he had also practiced, forms of hoodoo and stuff that he had learned from great grandma, who was from Louisiana. So basically, my people are from the South. I believe that a lot of things that I was experiencing, including having these visions, was connected to the fact that my ancestors were calling me. They were calling me to come on back home, So one of the things that caused me to eventually leave Islam was I was with an imam one day, and we went down to the Pike Place Market, and he wanted to have symbols put on the. They have like a rosary where they used to sticker beads, and then they chant these names of Allah, and they chant in remembrance of Allah. Well, I asked, well, why not put one of these symbols? And I pulled out an ankh, and he looked at me with disgust and said, we're not putting that pagan symbol on any of our jewelry. And Allah tells you to stay away from symbols and be careful of those things because you could be committing shirk and all that. And I said, okay, but you see, here's the thing. The ankh led me to Islam. So I decided that I was going to continue to follow the ankh. I got involved in Sufism. I began to understand that there was a connection to all things, and that, I began to understand that Allah was not just a personification, but a consciousness and energy that pervaded all things. So when you're talking about that form of realization, you begin to see what they call Tawheed. You begin to see what the true oneness and unity of all things were. Because then you came to the idea that the only thing that existed was, well, the divine. But that was from their interpretation of it. So we would chant and I go into trance, and it felt pretty good. But Kemet, Africa, continued to call me. And my father would tell me about how my great grandmother had practiced, an African religion, or practiced an African form of spirituality. They had called it Vodun. She was a voodoo priestess by night, and a Catholic by day, so forth. And I was running into all these blockages in my life, so I discovered that the ancestors were calling me to look deeper into my African roots, so I got into the Yoruba tradition. I got into the Congo traditions. I'd studied these traditions pretty intensely. I learned songs and everything else. And I also had learned that what we still practice in a lot of our surviving African traditions, you look on those pictograms and you'll see that they were practicing those in Kemet too, including the libations, remembering of the ancestors, and dancing on behalf of spirit as a form of devotion. You see all these on the walls. And I remember reading E.A. Wallace Budge's material, and he actually said that, yes, there was a relationship to the Egyptians and the Negroes. In other words, he knew that they were Africans. Okay. But he was also an Englishman, so he had to kind of be careful with how much he, spoke, because then you could see where he would give clues about the connections between the Kemetic traditions and Christianity, that he had saw the connections. He had also studied the traditions of Ethiopia and so forth. So anyway, this led me to studying Ra Nephra-Amin's Medu Neter, volume 1 and 2. Now he's got 7 volumes. And I study, I meditate, I do some of the things he had spoke about in the Medu Neter. Yes, there we go. There we go. Yes. That book right there had me make a lot of connections, because what I felt that Ra Nephra-Amin did is Ra Nephra-Amin, or Shechem, made the connections where other people hesitated to make those connections. He saw the universality of these particular deities. Some would call them archetypes and so forth. So, I met a sister who was into the Hare Krishna movement. We would get together and sell oils and incense. And we ended up working together, and we went down to New York. And that's when I ran into an elder, Brother Baba Heru, on Grand Samaj Se Ptah. I met his brother, Pa'ur. And later on, he would, he actually gave me a flyer, because it had this very interesting picture on it. It showed the Neter men. And how they show men as being a male, he represents divine masculinity and so forth. And he was getting the brothers together and teaching us how to cultivate our life force as opposed to squandering it. So I ended up talking to a brother by the name of Grandmaster Cam. I called him on the phone. This was back like in the 90s. And he said, well, let me introduce you to Baba, Sonor Samaj at the time. And I was like, okay, who is that? That sounds cool, So for the first time, I talked to Baba Heru, Grand Samaj Se Ptah, and he had this very, even though it was peaceful and gentle, you can hear this authority in his voice, like he was really about it. He wasn't just someone dabbling in this. So, I spoke to him, and one of the first things he had talked about is, I recall him talking about how all these brothers were suffering from prostate cancer and everything else, and he was attributing it to our diet, or our lack of nutrition. So he would say, okay, we need to get off the diet and get on a live it. We need to start eating, in other words, eating to live. So he spoke about the need to, eat green vegetables. Now, before then, I had taken on the name Jihad Amin, because I was dealing with, I was still, for a long time dealing with Islam, but I was also, kind of like, yeah, maybe a heretic, you might could say, because I was looking into all these things that the religion forbade me to do. But I had this interest in my curiosity was stronger than my fear of dogma, you know, and no disrespect to anybody who practices any of these traditions. But, you know, that was the boat that got me to a certain point. So eventually, you know, by connecting with Bobby Heru, he gave me a sense of liberation in my studies. You know, and he had said, hey, you know, if you want to learn Hesi, you know, get you a Purdom Heru, aka the Dover translation of the Egyptian Book of the Dead by E. Wallace Budge, and study the language and find sentences that you can repeat over and over again, and that would be your Hesi. And I discovered that by doing that, I would get into this elevated state of consciousness.
What is Hesi? You said you were studying Hesi. Is that the actual metal netter or the scripture itself in an ancient language?
So Hesi, you know, would be our sounds of power, right? Or Hekau, you know. So, for instance, let's see the title of the first part in the Pert of Haru where it says, praise be to Ra when he rises in the east of heaven. You get in the morning, you say, Duara keftu beneftim kutab tetin pet, right? Duara keftu beneftim kutab tetin pet. And then you synchronize it with the breath mentally. Duara keftu beneftim kutab tetin pet. You know, so then later I'd also connect with another brother who was connected with the shrine of Ptah, who had branched out and established the temple of the white and gold lotus. His name was Khepra. He had also had studied under and with Baba Heru, Ankara Samaj Ptah. They knew each other. They also knew Ron Ephraim. You know, these brothers used to hang out together at one point in time. So Hedi Khepra taught me about what was called the triple Hesi. And the triple Hesi is a formula that I utilize when you go into meditation, but the way it sounds is Anecharak Amin Ra, Nukta Tirat Amin Ra, Anuk Amin Ra. Anecharak Amin Ra, meaning show me your face, Amin Ra, because you are searching for the divine. You want the divine to reveal itself to you, you know. Then you say, Nukta Tirat Amin Ra. You say, I am the power of Amin Ra. So Tirna or Tirnet or Tir represents the power, right? And yes, we are embodiments. We're like vehicles of Amin Ra. And then the last part, you say Anuk Amin Ra, which is I am Amin Ra. So that represents 3 stages of realization or Ra-ization. You see what I mean? You're understanding that first you go and you seek who the divine is, right? You identify with this power. And then you come to realization that you and this supreme being are not separate. In fact, we are vehicles in which the supreme being, or this body in which we have, is vehicles in which the spirit operates through. Hence, in the Purdom Heruim Ger, where you say, my spirit is divine, where you say, Nukba Nter or Netter. So I found that I had a drawing. In fact, even before I went into, you know, this journey, I remember I had a next door neighbor, and when I was really, really young, you know, and she opened up a book about, you know, ancient Egypt, and it fascinated me. It pulled me. I'm like, wow. So this is Egypt. You know, I was fascinated with the shapes of the pyramids and the obelisk, or should I say, the Metakut and the Tekken. You know, all of these things that just grab my attention. And I see how it grabs the attention of many, you know. But one of the things that I come to realize is that, you know, by studying the various scholars like Sheikh Antijab, Dr. Ivan Man Serdama, and so forth, Jacob Carruthers, you know, Anthony Browder. These are the brothers that I was studying their works around in the 90s and early 2000s. I discovered that, unfortunately, you know, people of African descent had to fight for this identity and having this connection, you see. Now, And this is something I think that needs to be addressed, because the paradigm is that they kidnapped black people. They took them from, West Africa and brought them here, but they don't talk about all the history that led up to any of that. They don't talk about how there were trade routes and that there was exchanges of ideas and that people did not stick around in the same place for 50,000 years without migrating, intermixing and marrying, you see. And if you look at a lot of the practices found throughout West Africa, you will see where there are similarities, depicted in ancient Kemet, including I talked to another or a priest in the Yoruba tradition who said that the divination system, excuse me, that's utilized by the Yoruba, which is called Ifa, is pretty much the same divination system that's utilized in Egypt or Kemet. His words, Egypt, right? Kemet. So he said it's not just similar, it is the same system of divination. Only difference is the Yoruba uses these palm nuts, while in while they use sticks, but you pull one, you mark two, you pull two, you mark one, some forth, like, similar to that particular practice. And then you make a mark, you come up with 4 lines, right, or 4 markings, and each mark represents a story, right? So this is how they would divine, so they'll create like, 2 legs in the Yoruba tradition, and they'll divine and tell you what your story is, what you're going through in life, and what you can also do to reconnect yourself to your destiny. So believe that each and every one of us have a divine destiny. So when you get into Ron Ephraim Men's teachings and Ahmed Netter, he have a very similar, point of view as far as you being in a clan of a certain Netter, right? So the Yoruba tradition, it teaches that, in Orishas were assigned to us. And all of these things have to do with our destiny and where it is that where we're supposed to be traveling in life. The thing about it is that when we come to the earth, things go on that traumatize us. In fact, even birth itself, that traumatizes us and it causes us to forget. So this trauma is symbolic or symbolized by the tearing up of Osir into 14 pieces and basically being scattered by his brother Seth. When we look at our personal lives, we see that we as a people have not only been traumatized, broken up, and scattered, right? But we're also going through a transformation in which eventually it comes back together. The pieces are brought back together. And Osir or Osiris is resurrected in our being. And this story plays out not just with the history of a people, right, which was divided up during the Berlin Conference when 14 European nations got together and divided up Africa and put the artificial borders up there, but also the 14 aspects of Osir, the 14 pieces of Osir, in which the phallus was devoured or swallowed by the Oxyrhynchus fish, which means long-snouted fish. It says that this fish swallowed the male member, and Aset eventually, who gathered up the pieces, she had to remember, she gathers up the pieces of Asar, and she would replace that member with a golden member, so forth. So, I mean, there's so much to that story. We have been scattered. One of the things that they will do, is try to destroy the warriors or destroy the men. So we're looking at now, in this particular age, we're seeing where our brothers have also been scattered. We've been scattered. To our sisters' dismay, they see that we have been scattered. We have been weakened. This goes back to the men factor in which Bobby Heru was talking about. How you can cultivate this sexual energy or cultivate this life force energy and awaken the Haru or the Osar and the hidden light within you, the Amun Ra aspect. So each and every one of us is on a journey, and we have to continue to strive. When we tap into the Haru, that means we have the willpower to overcome these obstacles. We tap into our memory.
which is our set, and she helps bring these pieces back together. And we utilize the
imagination to create. And this kind of works as a direction for where the will is to go. So we have to
tap into the universal
mind. They say the all is mind, the universe is mental, according to the first principle in the Hermetic works of the Kybalion. So a lot of the works of Hermetica, even though a lot of this work is utilized today, in Western occult science, is attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, who is none other than Tahuti.
A lot of your secret societies today, they give props to folk or Tahuti. They call him Hermes. Rosicrucianism, Freemasonry, all of that. Because they recognize
who the builders were. They've taken the principles of the builders, and you see these principles applied to how they lay out cities to this day.
That's why they give
so much props
to what came out of
the Nile Valley,
because they see that that is the
foundation of even Western civilization,
including what brought forth the European Renaissance,
is them studying what came out of the land of that pyramid.
Or those pyramids. Aristotle, Plato,
Socrates.
If it wasn't for Kemet, there would be no Greek philosophy. There would never have been
initiates who would have went to Kemet and sat under the feet of the masters and taken their knowledge back.
And even though they may
have persecuted Socrates and made him drink the hemlock, somehow that knowledge was still preserved
to bring forth the European Renaissance
when he opened up a bunch of books on Greek philosophy and Hermetic texts brought in by the Arabs and Moors that took that knowledge also into Spain and Italy and France.
When you look at a lot of your
occult teachings,
a lot of it comes from
those areas,
including Germany. So when you look at the
Western occult teachings, a lot of it comes from those areas.
And even the black
Madonnas of southern France, you see the connection to Isis or Aset. And then there's Paris, which is part of Isis,
which is the dwelling place
of Aset or Isis.
So as far as
the modern practice, and Kemet being practiced in a modern time,
the thing about it
is
move your mic.
Is still there.
Move your mic closer, good brother. It's like your audio's going in and out. It's like going in. Yeah, it's fading, but it's going in and out.
All right, can you hear me better now?
No, actually. I can hear you though. Keep going though. Keep going. It's like temporary. It just started though. I don't know what's going on, but it just started like maybe a minute ago.
I see. Okay.
Keep going though. It kicks in.
Okay. Cool. But trying to read. I was on a roll,
and all of a sudden,
yeah. You talking about Paris? Sorry, you talking about Paris in Paris?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
So the modern
and Western
the modern science,
it's still here. You can't get rid of that
knowledge, even if they burned down the Library of Alexandria.
It's still there.
It's still within your DNA, and you can tap into it.
Your ancestors will teach it to you. It's there. You see, your genetic memory
goes all the way back to the Big Bang.
However, there's a
lot of things that have been set up to distract you
and keep you from being able to connect. But they say when you're down and out, the best place to go is in and up. Well, they don't want you
going in because you're going to go up and out of this systematic way of thinking.
They don't want you to transcend
the dualistic game that they keep playing with you.
Right? And they play a lot
of games with us.
But that's how they keep you occupied. As they keep you occupied,
you don't have time to focus on your inner divinity. So that's why they do everything that they can to occupy your time and space.
And got you chasing money.
And calling you and got you saying that time is money. Right?
But so one of the things
in a Purdom Haru or some of the works of that you find, and even Budge's works, it has this saying where it says, what the netter hates is too much talking. So with that said, that it's great to have some quiet time where you could just sit still and allow the divine revelations to come to you. Unfortunately, you know, like I said before, they keep you busy, you see. So the best thing to do is get into netter or nature. The word netter and nature has the same etymology. You remove the vowels and you got the same word, inter, netter. Connecting with the divine, you go out in nature. You connect with the trees, you connect with the water. And the African tradition, it teaches you that you can connect with the forces of netter, with the forces of nature. The Orishas are forces of nature. The Abasam of God, of the Akan tradition, forces of nature. The Loa of Haitian voodoo, forces of nature. You see, the Mpungus of the Congo traditions, forces of nature. You connect with these forces of nature, and this is how you tap into your inner self, because you also connect with your divine nature, which makes you supernatural. Okay. Hold on a minute. Let me see something. Okay. You see me?
Yeah. See, we can see you. We can hear you.
Okay. So I'm working on a book called Solarization, Pathway to Ascension. And it's a play on words, solarization. And this is for African people. African. You know, you look at the Kemetic word Afra, and it means the flesh of Ra. African. Ka, Afrika, the flesh and the spirit of Ra. You see, so
it'll be the flesh of the sun, basically.
Exactly.
Or the surface of the sun.
Indeed. You know, and interesting, you know, you see that AU in the alchemical connection, or should I say that as far as on the periodic table for gold. So, Au, Ra, Ka, the flesh of Ra. And the sun and the gold is connected to the sun in Western occult traditions, right? The gold also symbolizes a state in which we reach when you go from being that which is led, or should I say, led by your five senses, right? The metal is called lead, but eventually you transmute it to a higher state, a higher property, and it's gold. Gold represents the purity of realization. You know, I think it's interesting. The Kemetic word for gold is also nub, right? And you look at Nubians, you know, so we look at Nubians. So we talk about that meaning the golden ones. It talks about how Ra came into being, how the Nubians are actually the seed of Ra, while the people of Kemet were the tears of Ra. But it was all part of the Nile Valley civilization. You know, so, you know, in some of these books on Egyptology, they make it seem like it's a derogatory thing. But to see yourself as being the seed of Ra is an honor. That means that within us is recognized that we have that sun, that solar force that we can always tap into. So your Western religions is based on the solar traditions, the Helios Biblion, or the Holy Bible. So to be holy is to be whole. To heal is to make whole. That's bringing the 14 pieces of Osir back together into oneness. And holy is derived from Helios, which is the name for the sun. And therefore, to truly be what is called holy is to be solarized, to be cleansed and purified. That's an alchemical thing, in which we cleanse ourselves through how we live, how we eat, you know, how we think. And we put ourselves in areas where we can evolve and dissolve all the vitriol, right, and all the impurities that we take on through everyday life in the society that is built in a certain way to get you to continue to work and give your power away by looking outside of yourself. You know, so we're coming into more and more of a realization that all of this stuff that we've been looking for, we have it here. We have it in us.
But even people who have
made this realization, the poor to be involved in all the drama and all the misunderstanding is there, and that's because of the fact that we're hit with a bunch of frequencies, we also hit with a bunch of things in our, in which they feed us. So we got to become really mindful, because it makes you forget. When you forget, then you're easy to control. The whole idea of bringing a SAR back together is to bring back together the members of a SAR. In other words, to remember, which means to go back and bring back the pieces to remember. Because everything they're doing is to distract you or affect your memory. So it's not so much that we get caught up on talking about, just what's happening, what they're doing and stuff like that, because we've also developed a bunch of, conspiracy theories and everything else. But there's a difference between a conspiracy and a theory. A conspiracy, conspire, means to be of one spirit. See? So that means that when you're dealing with people who have been plotting to get things to go a certain way, it's because they're operating on one spirit. That means they're operating on the same wavelength. What's been hard to get us to, do things in a way that's unified is because so many of us are operating on different wavelengths. And that's what it is, to keep you scattered. This is why it's important to find your center. This is why it's important to go by nature. We do not have Kemetic temples around us to this day. But if you look at the temples of ancient Kemet, they were built as structures that connected you to the universe, where you could see stars or astronomical shapes on the walls, star clusters like Septet or Sirius and Orion or Sa. When you look at the pyramid, the shafts are aligned with Orion and Septet, Sirius. And the reason why, or Canis Major, the reason why is because we are cosmic beings, you see. If you look at the obelisk, these obelisks, these Tekken, also known as Abra, which means the heart of Ra, are built in a way to get you to look up. Because our ancestors were also paying attention to the heavens so that they can keep everything in divine time. So we paid attention to the movement of stars and planets so that we can keep track of time. So Kemet, yes, it fell. Everything rises and falls. So ancient Kemet, it simply fell, not to stay down, but to be resurrected in time. This unity and the chaos in which we see it today, all that's going to shift because it represents us being horizontal, mentally. But eventually, we'll be resurrected in time. This is called ascension and transcendence. Why? Because you're ending the trance. You're ending the dance of the trance. Transcendence. It's time for us to tap into the divine. So in the trance, be in the moment and connect with the divine. Whenever you find yourself laying in a place of quietness, like in the middle of sleep or in the morning, and you start having messages come to you, pay attention to those messages because they're downloads. Get your pen and pad out and start writing it down, because the minute you get up out of bed and start moving around, you're going to start forgetting it. And you're going to be surprised on what's being downloaded to you, because sometimes you'll get downloads and you'll be taught words that you don't even know. And then you look in the dictionary and discover that those words are real. That happened to me. And before I even knew what an algorithm was, I was told what one was, and it was downloaded to me. Sometimes they'll teach you about things dealing with connecting with ancestors. Write it down. Write it down. Trust yourself, because you're not taught to trust yourself. You're taught that you always got to go to some source outside of yourself in order to, have proof. A lot of times when people talk about spirituality, it's kind of like tea. I can tell you what it tastes like, but if you can't sit down and have a taste of the tea with me, you're never going to know how the tea actually tastes. So we can build, we can philosophize, and there's nothing wrong with that. But until you get out there in the dirt, right? Get out amongst the trees and the water and talk to the trees and talk to the water and watch, the universe is going to start talking back to you. The hoodoo man, right? The juju man, they're constantly out in the woods looking for herbs, talking to the plants, and the plants talk back to them.
The universe talks back to you. Why? Because the universe
is voice activated. The universe is voice activated, and so is your DNA. Be careful what you say to yourself, and be careful what you say to the universe about yourself and even about your brother.
Our sister. Because what you say about others,
your inner being takes it personally. So when you're constantly gossiping and slandering, which we have been taught to do,
your inner being takes it personally, as if you're talking and gossiping about yourself. And it goes right into your subconscious.
It becomes a limitation.
So that's why they say what
the netter hates is too much talking. Pay attention to the quality of the words in which you use, because the words create. Ptah created the universe with an utterance. Some say Atum created the universe with an utterance. Well, we're also happy to shape and create the universe with an utterance. So that goes back to when you asked me the question about the meaning of Hatep. Why do we say Hatep to each other? What is Hatep? Hatep is an offering. It's peace. But when you make that offering to the other person, not only is that person lifted up, but you yourself are lifted up.
What you do to others, you do to yourself.
Exactly.
And that fits in with the universal theme of Kemet being one with the universe, and how, you know, when you think of like the structures of how things are in Kemet, how the columns are shaped by, you know, pi, and how you were saying how, you know, the Great Pyramid and the pyramids are shaped towards what they call Orion's belt, and towards Sopdet or Sirius. So everything had a universal, holistic, or an output of oneness. And, you know, sparked a thought when you were talking about the Tekken or the obelisk, and how even the Washington Monument is a replica of the obelisk of Kemet, or what they would call Egypt nowadays. And even how they took, basically Washington D.C. is a replica of the Temple of Dendera, I believe, or in the city of Kemet, and the waterways and things like that. Even the pool is the same exact replica of Egypt. What would you say to people? Because there's a movement growing nowadays, Khepra Ptah, where people are like, well, Egypt is America, and we were here already. And it's kind of like people are trying to disillusion themselves from Egypt because it's in Africa, and they don't want to tie themselves down to that part of the land because they feel like it's quote unquote foreign.
You know, there's been a
movement to disconnect us from Africa, okay? And I'm aware of our Aborigine sisters and brothers in their position, you know, and
I will say
this much. There's a connection as far as when you look at how the pyramids in Mexico and Teotihuacan are arranged, and how they also line up with the star system of Orion. But there's no glyphs saying that any of this is Kemet or Tameri. There's no glyphs in the Mayan, in the Nahuatl language. That's what it's called, Nahuatl. There's no glyphs anywhere in the Mayan language or the Aztec language that says Kemet. And if there is, I'd invite a sister or a brother to show me and translate that into Metanetter. The words in the Metanetter are very precise. You see Kemet, then, you know, you see the piece of charcoal, and you see the owl, and you see the loaf of bread, spelling Kemet. So, you know, so to say that this is Kemet, or even to say this is Egypt, I think that's sort of a stretch, you know. So I like to say that this is Egypt itself. A lot of the buildings, you know, like the Washington Monument and everything else, there's Memphis, but the Memphis in America is nowhere near as old as the Menefer over there in Kemet. You know, that's the land that unites the two lands over there in Kemet, Menefer, which means the beautiful land, or the established land of harmony.
But what they did
try to do is they did try to replicate Kemet here,
with the various
Rosicrucian movements and everything else. They tried to replicate Kemet through like the buildings, and even the brother who had lay out the city, Washington D.C. That was a brother, and I can't think of his name right now. Benjamin Banneker. In fact,
Benjamin Banneker. I was just about to jump in. Yeah, Benjamin Banneker. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In fact,
they say that brother was of Dogon descent.
Wow, I didn't know that.
You see, and here's the thing.
Another thing they do is they attack they attack ancestry as far as the DNA test and everything else. Now, yes, the point is we did move around. We didn't stay in one place. But when I took my DNA test, right, you know what I discovered? That a lot of it coincided exactly with what my family told me. As well as the connection to Togo, as well as the connection to Ghana. And it's persistent. What other people in my family have told me. I didn't see any contradictions there. Even that connection with France and Spain, and all that appeared in my DNA. So it wasn't any contradictions. They even connected my people back to Louisiana and the Creoles over there. There was no lies mentioned. Nothing was out of sync with what I already knew. And there's also this other part where you can upload your chromosomes and see which chromosome came from where, is connected to where. And I discovered that I had ancestors who came out of Nubia, who were also, they showed Kush, it showed ancient Somalia, all that appeared, you see, which tells me that my ancestors were not always or only in West Africa. And no disrespect to West African traditionalists, but I think it's important for us to make that connection. Now, as far as the Olmecs are concerned, we see that, those features, they have very, very African looking features, and what I noticed, what makes it difficult is the games that, they play with propaganda and everything else. Ivan Van Sertima, this book, They Came Before Columbus. I remember him showing how they took one of the pictures of, I believe it was a king, and they show him sitting in sideways profile. And he had a different kind of nose. And it had literally had like a bone in the nose. And he showed how they had altered the picture and made his face look like how they have like the noses that kind of stick out. They changed the picture. Now he did show that, and there's reason to believe that the Cometians also was able to use a current to come right over here to North America. They showed, there's proof of that, and they were able to connect with the people. People here. They find, the cocaine leaves within material of the cocaine plant within, or cocoa plant within the belly of Ramses. So yeah, they had boats though, The Pangea is another one of their arguments, and it's just, again, but the Pangea, that happened way longer than 5,000 years ago. Okay. So the idea that, it was just one big Pangea, it kind of takes us away from how all the continents would connect. True. But where those continents did connect, the Great Pyramid of Giza, 144 meters high, 14 acres at its base, over 2 million blocks of stone. That Great Pyramid would be in the center of where everything connected. But that does not necessarily mean that humans just simply walked because all the land was connected. Because when the Pangea existed, for what I can see, there weren't humans, at least modern humans from what we have today, walking around at that point in time. They built boats, and there's stories of boats. The Aborigines, they got pictures of boats on some of their stones, okay? Which means that they came there by a boat too. So obviously they knew how to build boats. But if you're dealing with racist academia, they're not going to tell you that your ancestors knew how to build boats, even though they found a big ship, I believe it was in the tomb of Thutmose, but they found this humongous ship in Kemet. They find pieces of boats and ships and everything else and show them setting sail. So yeah, our ancestors traveled around the world. They connected with people. They connected with other cultures.
So another thing too.
Some of the images that I see that shows our Native American, or should I say, indigenous people. Unfortunately, some of those images have been photoshopped where they are superimposed
Black features on the so-called red
Indians. I've seen that too.
Okay. So we got to be a little bit more
honest. We can't just go ahead and
make things up as
we go along because we feel a certain way, And I've heard people say, well, my grandma said we've always been here.
But yeah,
I love grandma. But guess what? My grandma practiced an African spiritual tradition.
And my grandma
didn't know any Native American words.
It's popular to say that you're
Cherokee.
Cherokees had slaves. No disrespect, but the Cherokee
Nation not too long ago put all the Black people off the board of having any type of authority of the Cherokee Nation.
Or Salagi, if you know. So, and I got connections
with Native American blood too, but the thing about it is that if you deny Africa, you're cutting yourself off from the ancestors that give you the power that you have. You cannot call on your ancestors if you would not acknowledge them. We call upon your ancestors and it gives you a certain amount of what we call ashe and spiritual power. And before you begin any ritual in African traditions, you always call upon your ancestors first, as far as they can go. And those in whose names you do not remember, you just call upon their attributes, those ancestors who died in the Middle Passage. And there was a slave trade that happened. It's not a myth. There's over 40 different so-called slave castles over there on the coast of Africa. 40, at least.
So our ancestors did not make that up.
That's the slave trade's not made up. I had a sister tell me that there was a slave ship in Virginia and they got rid of it. So when they asked, well, where are the boats? They got rid of the boats. Why would they keep the evidence around if they don't want you making a connection to Africa?
There were people against
the Garvey movement.
So the so-called
10% or your intellectual elite, who are basically your boule members, and and there's another word for them, the talented 10th. They turned against W.E.B. Du Bois because he began to recognize a connection to Africa. He wanted to go back to Africa, and he ended up going to Africa despite his dispute with Marcus Garvey. And ironically, Brother Du Bois actually set up a university in Ghana. And he's the one that actually died on African soil when he had disputed with Marcus Garvey about the same thing years earlier.
But yeah,
a lot of these brothers will take things that Martin Luther King said, they'll slice them up, and they'll only let you hear the portion where he mentions about being on his land, but not about the portion where he talks about Africa. Or they'll say stuff like Malcolm X said that he was home, that his home was in America. I've heard that, but guess what? They don't talk about how when Malcolm X went back to West Africa and he was well received, and they call him Omawali.
Omawali.
Meaning the child, the child comes home, Omawali.
He was Omawali.
He's the child that returned home.
That's a Yoruba name. And he didn't get that here.
He got that when he went to Africa.
So there's still stories
about how Africans were taken from Africa. Where they say that the Africans don't acknowledge us having any connection with them. That's not true. There's African historians over there that talk about how Africans were kidnapped and they were brought here.
So I just want people
to pay attention because we're told a lot of things. And a lot of times when you're told something that you've never heard before, you may not know exactly how to stand up to it because you may not have heard information contrary to what's being told because it sounds so deep to you. But what I say is that, talk to people. You got to communicate with other people. Talk to you. There's been a method of keeping Africans and African Americans, if you may, separated. And that is, they're told not to interact with us
before they even get
over here. They're told that if they interact with us, they will be deported. And I'd also got word years ago that there's a part of Ethiopia where anyone who was caught with, materials of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, that information was confiscated. So there's been a concerted effort to stop you from connecting with your sisters and brothers on the continent.
So there's stories
about that. So we need to cut that out. We got it. It's here. And I'm not saying that we don't have ties to the land, because in African tradition, if your ancestors have died, you've been here for, we've been here for a considerable amount of time. Your mother, your father, your grandmother, great-grandmother, great-grandparents is buried on this land. So according to African tradition, yes, that land has now been made sacred.
Wherever your parents are
buried, your ancestors are buried, that land is considered sacred land to you, and you can tap into the spirit of your ancestors that's on that land. So I will say that.
But my war is
not with my sisters and brothers who want to identify with the Aboriginal movement. My war is not with the Hebrew Israelite brothers. It's not with my Muslim brother. That's not with my war. My war is not with you. However, I think we need to have a serious dialogue, and clear up a few misconceptions.
That's just my take on it. All of my sisters
and brothers, I understand our struggle. I understand how the CIA have used COINTELPRO on us to divide us up. They don't want you having any connection with those resources. They want to steal the resources out of Africa.
Yeah, if you don't have a connection with it, you won't fight for it. You won't talk about it, and you won't connect with it. And it's also cutting you off from what you would call the universal cord, so to speak, or the through line that connects all of us that are melanated beings to one another. So it kind of, it's the old divide and conquer, so to speak. And, even when you talk about, from my studies, when you talk about like the South and hoodoo and voodoo and those traditions, like a lot of the brothers, like for instance, what's the tribe? The Geechees. Like you could trace a lot of the Geechees to Burkina Faso in Western Africa, to Freetown, to Liberia, to those different places where you'll see that they were constantly back and forth from, the Atlanta region, the Southern region, the Carolinas, and even down to Florida. And they were constantly migrating back and forth, and trading ideas. So there's always a through line with the so-called African American and the African. But as you said, it's designed so that we don't look to those places, so that we don't get those spiritual resources, so that we can't remember, right? Put the 14 pieces of our saw back together and remember.
Right, exactly.
Remember, their greatest attack on us is through distraction and the erasure of our memory. They want to erase your memory, because if you have no connection with what you can remember, if you cannot remember, then you have no connection with your ancestors, and therefore you are disconnected from the source. It says, man, know thyself. Man, woman, and child, know thyself. Know yourself. Know who you are. Know who your ancestors are, and call their names.
And so it's important to start
keeping track of your family members. But one of the things that would frustrate me about a lot of us who get involved in your Abrahamic traditions, we can name all the prophets. There's some good scholars among some of us when it comes to that. We can name every prophet and their family and everything else. But when you ask them, well, who's your great grandmother? They don't know. So you need to at least be able to call upon your great grandmother. Try to learn your great grandmother's name, your great great grandmother's name, and great grandfather's name. You see, learn about the history of your lineage and family, because you're dealing with 14 pieces of a saw. You can look at 7 generations on your mother's side and 7 generations on your father's side. They say honor your mother and father, and your days will be longer. It even says that in the King James Bible,
or in the Bible. So, when it comes
to African tradition and most of your real indigenous traditions around the planet, you always honor your ancestors and you know their names. You don't just talk about, what you think they might have done. You actually try to learn and communicate with them. Sit still, because their DNA is within you.
So we're always going
through an evolution. It is said that Ra, the spirit of our sun, travels in the Duat, which is the universe, and survives by going through many transformations. Transformations, that is a change in formation. Their teachers speak on the planetary shift as if it's one event, but it's something that occurs in a periodic cycle because we're always going through transformations every 25,920 years or that 26,000 year period. You see, we're constantly transforming, changing, you see. And this is Ra working through us, going through different experiences. And like the sun, the human body also generates heat, and heat itself, when something is alive, it is warm, it is hot, it has heat. When something is moving, it produces heat. Human body is a conductor of Ra, the life force, which is indeed Ra, and it functions as your internal solar sexual energy that keeps us alive, creative. Because once you start getting misaligned and your life force is no longer strong, you will be tired, you will be forgetful, you will not be able to function, you will get into arguments, you will misplace things because your life force
has been thrown off. So you have to,
you go to these rituals, you put yourself in a state of trance, right? And you put yourself in a high elevated sense. Like even in the church, you got people, some people get the Holy Ghost, the Holy Spirit over and over again. And they put themselves in this hyped up state until they reach this level. It's kind of like an orgasm in a way, you know. There's a lot of women that are in the church. There are a lot of women who don't have orgasms.
So that's why they reach that state and they're having this release energy in the form
of what they call catching the Holy Spirit. But there's another way to catch the Holy Spirit or the heliospirit or the spirit of the sun. When you get into a state where you receive downloads, and those downloads come into your being, and you can speak the universal language of truth to anybody that comes in front of you.
A lot of our being, they say that
90% of our being is unseen.
So when you go into
African traditions, they literally believe that you can communicate with the universe, and you're here to spiritualize matter, right? What's interesting, in African tradition, they call it animism when it comes to Africans, but guess what they call it when it comes to European practices?
Alchemy. Because you see how they play
games? We listen to the word animism, and basically it's understanding that spirit pervades all things, and that you can also spiritualize matter. That's basically what animism is, you know. So the totems and everything else, they're calling down the spiritual energy into certain things, whether they're statues or whether they're objects, right? In the Congo tradition, these embodiments of spirits are now called Nkisi.
Well, guess what?
In Hoodoo at one time, what was called a mojo bag, moyo, was an Nkisi. Nkisi. So yes, we spiritualize matter. And that's also one of the reasons why we're here, is to spiritualize matter, to be the alchemist.
And we must spiritualize
our own matter.
And this is why we
pray, fast, meditate, do toning. And feel it through your being. If you do this enough, when you chant, meditate, breathe in. If you breathe in, what it does is it expands your auric field, and people will feel it after a while. You can walk into a room and people will sense you, because now you're resonating and you're sealed up these holes in your aura. But a lot of times we don't want to, sound too spooky, so we tend to leave that part out. But you can also charge up your auric field when you charge up your life force and strengthen your life force. But there's different people with different temperaments, and therefore they have access to energies in different environments. Some people, they get their energies when they go by water. Some people get their energy when they go by trees. Some people get their energy when they may stand on top of a mountain. And a lot of times, a clue to how they get the most energetic connection may be the Orisha, or the deities that are on them or around them, you see. So we become the embodiment of Ra. We become the vehicle. I once asked my oracle Is man supposed to be the vehicle of divinity, or the vehicle of God on earth? And it said yes. And it's the West African oracle. It said Ra in his form of Atum created himself in a multitude of forms, and after making Ma'at the foundation in the Sabai, right? And Kemet wisdom teachings. It talks about he made Ma'at the foundation, something to stand upon. So what we are is we're a spirit that has been differentiated, broken down into many pieces and expressions and forms. We're spirit, we're divinity, speaking to divinity. However, we create laws and we give ourselves definition and we give ourselves purpose in order to manifest in creation. And then you have Apep. And Apep is known as the crocodile, or sometimes the crocodile, sometimes the giant serpent or a boa constrictor. You know, Apep manifests in our personal lives when we break too many of those spiritual laws. It shows that Apep being the serpent devil that would try to swallow and eat the sun, and was fought off by Raharakti with the help of even Set, who would stand at the front of the helm to spear, away or fight off Apep. And there's also a story that talks about how Set had turned against Apep and was struck down, and was, struck down and fell to earth. Sounds familiar? So a lot of your stories in your Bible and everything else, they are reflections of ancient stories that was told by the ancient ones. The Remech, another word for Kemal, the Remesh, are the humans, the people, the Timimu, right? We are all aspects of Atum, or we did say later Adam. Humanity and all living things make up the collective experience of consciousness, and the world is a place of separation, but on the highest level, this separation is an illusion. Unfortunately, due to economic and political agendas, it appears that the original people have been displaced. And that's why you got all this confusion about who we are, where we're from. Are we from this land? Are we from that land? Is the world round? Is the world flat? Here's the thing. Always connect with your inner divinity, but you also got to go on a journey. And you have to find these things out, and you need to study. You need to put yourself in a place where you will actually read and take the time to not just read what makes you feel good. It's not about just what somebody told you. Okay. The way you connect with a universal principle is that you got to get out and you got to connect with that principle, because these universal principles are the Netaru. Mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and gender, right? These 7 hermetic principles are existence. They're laws in which you operate from in order to get the things to manifest in your life that you want or need for you to fulfill your mission in this particular incarnation. So
I call them the 7 Kemetic principles. I don't respect Hermes Tristan gets this at all. Yeah. So I call them the 7 Kemetic principles. Yeah. Go ahead, brothers. I just want to interject on that. Yeah.
I appreciate that, brother, and I agree totally, because those come out of Kemet, and a lot of us have found ourselves going into, these metaphysical bookstores and reading and studying this material, and we feel that there's something about it that resonates. There's something about it that we recognize, and that's because these are the principles that you innately connect to. You just have to remember. You see, so get you a ball of water, light you a candle, sit, meditate on the water, talk to the water, talk to the elements, light you a fire, talk to the fire, see how you feel, sit still and see what comes to you. Water is the Kalunga of the Congo tradition. It is where spirit comes into this world, and you leave through water, or you connect with the water. Water is the form of communication. Then it's fire, right? The power of fire. Fire purifies. It is through fire that nature is renewed whole. That's another aspect of alchemy. We're looking into the idea of dealing with the elements. We're tapping into these hidden forces, the elements, and we're connecting to them. We become masters of the elements: earth, wind, fire, water, ether. And all these elements are also processes in which we go through. We go through a time where we're hot, a time where we're cold, a time where we're warm, a time where we're dry, a time where we're damp, you see. So all this corresponds to the food that you eat, and even the music that you listen to with the tones and frequencies. All of these things that have an effect on your auric field. The universe is information.
So the information
that we put into our bodies affect our vibration, which in different ways, different foods, as well as what they taste like, has an effect, not just on your health, but on how you feel and think. So when you get into some of the sciences that come from the ancients, you discover that, how you eat, even the very taste itself, is a medicine for who you are, right? You get into holistic teachings, like, you look at, like, for instance, Indian medicine and Chinese medicine. You discover that the different tastes can have an effect on how you feel. And it's believed that in Ayurveda, if you was to have all 6 tastes balanced enough, it can heal you of just about any ailment, because food is medicine. Well, you go back to the papyrus. There's also, like, the medical papyrus that talks about these 12 main meridians that they talk about in Chinese medicine. That's found in ancient Kemetic medical texts as well, about connecting with the divine aspect of yourself. Then you get into Purnim Haru, and there's the divination of the body members, where Anis says, my hair, my face is of Ra, my 2 eyes of Hedaru, my ears of Apurat, my nose is of Kinshas, my teeth are of Khepra, my lips of Ampur, my neck is of Aset, my hands are Kinamu, my forearms are neat, lady of Saul, my backbone is of Set, my phallus of Asar, or for the woman, she'll say her womb is a Mut, and so forth. And then it says, not a member of me is without divinity. To it he protects my flesh entirely. I am Ra every day. Not shall I be seized by my arms. Not shall I be carried away by my hands. Not the men, women, or shining ones, or any mortal. Anyone who disrespects divine law should do harm to me, for I come forth advancing, and I know my name. I am yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Seer millions of years is my name, traveling several along the way of Haru the judge. You read the Purnim Harum Ger, and you see a whole bunch of affirmations. Because this is how we pray. We prayed and we sent commandments to the universe, because we understood that we are reflections of the universe, and the universe is a reflection of us, and that we are fractals. The universe is made of fractals, which are all self-similar parts, a hologram, where every part contains the whole. And we are part of this holographic divine matrix, in which we have access to the ability
to speak into existence the things in which we want to see manifest. But we also got to
deal with that which is in our subconscious, that which is the deep and back of our mind, which works like a computer virus. So when you have a virus, what happens is that programs on top of programs obscure the original program and slows down
the main program
until the whole thing crashes. It crashes the system. So you got to peel the layers of information and trauma. You got to peel back to the layers to get to the core self. And a lot of this is when you're fasting, when you're meditating. A lot of times these issues come up in the form of,
sometimes rashes on the
body, right?
You may feel sick for a while
because your body is purging itself. And then you'll notice that you'll have nightmares.
And you may see accidents around you.
Hopefully, okay, there you go. There you go.
Okay. So,
I got on the road, brother. You know what I mean? But
you dropping heavy jewelry. Dropping heavy jewelry, brother. But yeah, I know we at the hour 20-minute mark. Tell us how we could not only link with you, because I know your time is limited, how we could link with you and how we could get this information. Do you have a temple, a school, or how can we learn more about this Kemetic knowledge going forward? As you see, they turned up outside, so yeah, I'm gonna go mute and let you
Well,
I'm working on something right now. We do have brothers who come to classes in fact, the class is about to begin tonight in about an hour. So far we've been having them here in the comfort of my home, but I want to start putting some courses online. But if you're interested in learning more, first of all, I'm also a diviner. So you can reach me at 206-960-7999. And you can also email me at Khepra khepra.ptah@gmail.com. You know, you can find me on Facebook, and you can also subscribe to my channel of Khepra Ptah, and we can also connect there as well. So, you know, I'm gonna let you know, I have not put anything online as of yet, but I am working on it. And plus my book, I would like to, establish kind of like a study group around that, study guide around that. So I'm gonna definitely keep you informed. For those who would like to have readings and discover who are their Netaru or who are their Orishas and so forth, you can also contact me, and we can set up a time where we can look and see what your destiny is, and what it is that may be misaligned, and how you can realign with your destiny. Okay.
Ashe, Hetapu. And where do they find you on social media? How do they find you on social media? Because you drop a lot of science on social media as well.
Okay. Well, let's see. So I've
Khepra Ptah on Facebook, Khepra Ptah, and also I have an Instagram, which is Khepra Ptah under the same name, and also on YouTube under the same name, Khepra Ptah,
Khepra Ptah, and I think that's about it for now. Oh yeah,
TikTok. From time to time I do a few demonstrations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like the demonstration you had about the sun and putting your hands out to the sun to receive energy and standing right in the sunlight and just putting your hands out to receive energy. And you see the netters or the divine deities in the physical form have the same imagery of having their hands up. So I thought that was pretty deep. Yeah, putting your hands out to the sun to receive cosmic energy and to invigorate, as you said, our auric body or electromagnetic field. My brother, I'm gonna say peace to you, peace to the family. Thank you guys for tapping in. And as we have learned, we're going to end with Hetapu, say it again, Hetapu, Anu Sanet.
You got it, brother. Uncle Sanet.
There we go. My brother, I'm gonna tap in with you offline, get a reading from you myself. So I appreciate you. Thank you everybody for stopping in and coming by. We had the audio issues, but y'all still rock with me. I appreciate it. And hit that like button, hit that share button, hit that subscribe, and tap in with the brother Khepra Ptah. As you see, he's a wealth of knowledge, information, and wisdom. And he give you some knowledge and some source information about where you come from and what you need to do moving forward so we could heal this trauma of Western civilization and get back into our true essence, which is universal civilization. Peace to the family.